Hello, everyone. Welcome to this espresso session with SmartStream. We're going to talk through how to make every day a good reporting day. My name is Jethro MacDonald. I'm the product manager of AI and machine learning at SmartStream. So I look at how we can utilize different technologies within the firm at SmartStream and how we can roll those out to add different products. I'm also joined here by with Aparajita Bose-Mullick, who is from SmartStream RDU. Do you want to give yourself a little introduction, Aparajita?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. I'm the Global Product Manager of the Reference Data Utility here at SmartStream.
Awesome, thank you very much. So yeah, as I said, we're going to go through how to make a reporting day a good reporting day. So one of the things that I've noticed recently is actually the increase in the fines and sanctions that have been going on between the regulator and obviously, you know, things related to divergence with Brexit and how that's impacting clients. Is that something, Aparajita, that you've experienced and how that impacts clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So here in the RDU, we look at regulations across the board, so across MiFID and SFTR, and we're noticing that fines are going up, but also for different types of reasons. So firstly, I would say over-reporting as opposed to under-reporting from participants. But also what's really interesting is that where previously the regulator would have allowed a report to be submitted because there was enough content, now I'm seeing a real focus on the accuracy of the data that participants are actually submitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's certainly something that, you know, I've seen from my side as well. And one of the things that's really interesting with obviously Brexit is that divergence as well. I was told recently by someone in the industry that SFTR they had validation rule changes, and the FCA went with the changes 3 months later than Europe, which caused really big complications in how firms were reporting, just adding to that overhead as well. And I think one of the things I've also seen is you know, it's not just around divergence of the actual regulation as well, but also the divergence of what the regulators are looking at. You just have to look at the recent report on fines and sanctions to see, you know, how different the focus is per regulator. You know, some might have a real focus on one particular part of the regulations and another firm might have another focus. And that's obviously quite overwhelming for these firms.
Yeah, so we've been in the RDU, you know, we've been Brexit compliant since our data has been Brexit compliant since the 1st of January 2020. You know, what's really starting to show is that the data on day one, there was no divergence, right? But we're starting to see those divergences for sure. And it's not just about the data itself, but it's the actual way each regulatory body is moving in terms of what they're actually focusing on. It was really exciting for us, for example, when you came to us and told us that you wanted to look at the historical TOTV data.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, you know, that's one of the things. My background is very much regulatory focused. So I came from one of the arms and the APAs in the industry. And I was really excited with, you know, the data that we had at SmartStream RDU. So, you know, one of the big things that was a focus with MiFID I was, you know, under and over reporting. There were a number of fines issued to major investment banks because of that. And, you know, with the specialist data at SmartStream RDU, we're also able to validate reporting decisions. So I was really excited that we could do that. You know, in the firm, we can not just reconcile from a client's source system right down to the regulator, but we can also validate whether they should have reported that as well. So, you know, that was really exciting for me and being able to partner with you guys.
So do you see any kind of duplication? So just to give you some context, we aggregate, we collate, aggregate, normalize, standardize, cleanse across over 12 different data sources here in the RDU for our MiFID data, for example. And you know, it's one thing to do it once for ESMA, which we do, but now, of course, since January 1st, 2020, we've been doing it also for the FCA data. So there's another stream, if you will, of not just data sources that you have to maintain but also the 24 hours real-time monitoring of changes that get issued by the different each regulatory body that you then need to apply to the data. And it's a really interesting paradigm where we're in, where these divergences, I wonder from a cost perspective, but also from a transaction reporting and trade reporting perspective, how much duplication do you anticipate there being, if at all?
Yeah, of course. I mean, well, this is the thing, right? It's duplication in the sense that you're sending very similar reports to two different regulators. Now, traditionally you were reporting to one regulator and saying, if that was the FCA, everyone had formed a relationship and knew what they were looking for quite well. You now move to someone else, but you're reporting very similar information. But actually there's slight changes in what you need to send. And that's only going to get bigger. I was talking recently on a panel with someone who was at the FCA, and it was really insightful as to what he was saying were some of the complications now because of Brexit. Because before we used to have a seat at the table and we'd be in these open conversations with ESMA the whole time. And now, since Brexit, we're not at that table anymore. So we can't even have those conversations. And we're actually having conversations with, the regulator in the US and other regions more so than we are in Europe. And that's quite a scary thought, right? Because we're already seeing, the complications of having to report to two different regulators, but with slightly different data, and that's only really going to get worse. So it's quite overwhelming for clients at the moment.
Yeah, that you just sort of reminded me. Yeah, we're starting to see the consultation papers coming from the FCA where they're talking about rolling back parts of the SI regime, so the SI determination regime. And it's interesting because they, we touched upon it, right? They work at a completely different pace sometimes, and their focus is shifting. And we know that this is going to happen in the UK. We know that the FCA are going to be implementing these changes, and I am curious as to whether ESMA will have to maybe follow suit. It will certainly be at a later date, but for competition, for other reasons, right? To keep markets competitive, EU markets competitive, whether they will also have to follow suit or not. So maybe that duplication of data, from my perspective, I'm thinking on and what we've done in our monitoring and our data, where on day one it did feel like a duplication, but if you're now trying to do it from scratch, so again you are trying to aggregate, normalize, cleanse, standardize across 10, 12, 15 different data sources, you are going to see distinctive changes coming in. So while it is a duplication, I'm thinking about the sheer human power that goes into it, because this is our bread and butter. We do this every day. But for banks who may have, or any financial institution really, who may have done it the first time for ESMA and the EU, they potentially would have disbanded their teams, right? And they're essentially going to have to reband all of that just to be able to hit the ground running, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and that's the huge complication for these firms, right? It's the additional now resources that they're going to need to pull back in, because almost overnight their operational overhead almost doubled in a sense. And I touched upon it a little bit earlier, that focus as well for each regulator is potentially completely different, and that's quite an overwhelming prospect for firms. You've had a relationship with a regulator who you know well, and you know what they're looking for, and now it's just completely switched, and you're looking at something else. You're having to report slightly differently. You don't know what their focus is. And one of the things I noticed when I was working at the ARM and the APA, that there is a huge divergence of what regulators are looking for. One of the regulators that we moved to as a trading venue at that ARM and APA was really focused on order record keeping, which wasn't really something that the FCA had asked us to look into in that much detail. So then having to really upskill ourselves on exactly, what the regulator was looking for and all that sort of stuff. It's quite a big task, and it's a completely different focus. You've got different requirements from a reporting perspective there. So yeah, there's a lot to kind of be nervous, I guess, about for firms. But really, that's where I think our partnership with you has been really great, because we're able to offer a reconciliation solution where you can, from a transaction reporting perspective, you can check to see what's being reported in your front office system right the way down, but also we're validating those reporting decisions. And as I said, that's been a huge focus. If we look at MiFID I, where the previous fines have come, that's been all around over and under reporting. So that's why, it was really exciting to team up with you and use that specialist data. It's very exciting.
So control framework has been really a hot topic for our clients as well, right? Because you can no longer outsource the processes and the checks and balances that you have to have in place. Because from our perspective, we're seeing the regulators wanting control framework, not so much for the ad hoc errors that are being generated, but more to do with systemic errors that are being observed in the reports that get submitted, time after time after time. How are you seeing that impact in that transaction world?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that we've been working on quite excited about as well, separately. So, it's all well and good having sort of validation rules that the regulator implements, that you can, if you're reporting this kind of instrument, we need X, Y, Z to be reported as well. But there are certain fields which you don't capture by validation rules, and that's where we've sort of been looking at how we can use our specialist AI technology, because we as a firm are very big in the reconciliation space, and as part of that, in my role, I'm looking at how we can use the latest technology to use AI to help with all that. And one of the things that we're looking to do is, with more and more clients feeding in their transaction reports and using us for their reconciliation solution, we're also looking to look across, not just firm by firm, but look across firms where people are actually reporting differently, using that AI to see where you might have reported a particular field differently to your peers that isn't necessarily caught under the validation rules. And then we can give you back some insights saying, 95% of the time you're reporting it like this, when actually your peers are all reporting it like this. Is this something that you need to look at? And that's a really exciting and really good way of using kind of the latest technology to help improve that overall reporting framework.
So that's really fascinating, because one of the things we're seeing on the trade reporting side, as opposed to transaction reporting side, is that the regulator wanting to see underlying information for instruments match up as well, right? So we in the RDU we provide cross-reference capability across all of our products anyway, but that notion that they actually now want to start seeing counterparties match on the underlying data is also quite interesting. I do wonder if that's something that's going to bleed into transaction reporting at one time.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, because if you look at SFTR as a perfect example, that's all around. There's a concept of the UTI, the unique transaction identifier, which you have to share that between your counterparty, which means you have to have matched up on loads and loads of different fields with your counterparty. And as part of that, the repositories are actually performing a reconciliation, ensuring that the data is consistent between the two. And that's a huge focus for the regulator, because actually tying up and linking, certainly from a transaction reporting perspective, linking all the different trades and transactions, how they come together, is a huge focus for there, so they can actually look at where potentially market abuse could be happening, who's involved in these trades, why are they involved, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? It's like a spider web. It all, one leads to the other. There's a commingling of market abuse, risk management, regulatory reporting. It's almost like it's coalescing.
Yeah.
That same set of data can be used for so many different purposes
Mm-hmm.
to surface so many different activities, essentially.
Yeah.
And it also blows up to my mind also how you define what and how you use something like a control framework within your own four walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, this is the thing, right? And I guess this is why if we look at the regulations now and how we want to get to this level of being a lot more consistent and things like that, you know, Brexit being Brexit isn't probably not been great for getting that consistency, but I think there is in general a kind of push to ensure that, you know, EMIR, SFTR, MiFID II, that they're merging towards a consistent kind of place, with the added spanner of chucking Brexit in there. But
yeah. Why make it so easy, right? Why
yeah,
make it so
exactly.
for everybody? Okay, so it's been a really, really interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Jethro. If anybody has any comments, please feel free to leave them in the box below, or just email myself or Jethro.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.